Do you spend a ton of time training your SDRs only to find that they make the same mistake over and over again, take months to ramp, and have trouble making quota? Yoda AI by RingDNA delivers AI-powered conversation guidance so that every rep can sell like your top performer. In real time, deliver talking points that help reps overcome sales objections, stay on message, and beat the competition. You'll never have to endlessly repeat sales advice to reps again. It's easy to set up, easy to customize, and comes with out-of-the-box coaching best practices. Turn your team into a revenue-driving machine today with Yoda AI by RingDNA. To learn more, visit ringdna.com/Yoda. That's ringdna.com/YODA.
The gain that you get in a particular month to achieve something like artificial, like we're trying to deliver a number in a particular quarter or month, it's not the gain that you want about positioning the company long term, right? And doing what's best to safely build a relationship with another company that we both can operate in solid ground where, it's not a risky contract. Because these things you'll pay for eventually. Someone will pay for it, right? It may not be the frontline people, but someone will pay for it.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Vishal Sunak. He's the founder and CEO of LinkSquares. And in our conversation today, we dive into an important topic, certainly one I feel is important for sales teams, and that is one that's often overlooked. It's contract lifecycle management. I'm a big fan of having contract departments in sales, especially in high-growth companies. So we're going to explore why it's important to be able to write better contracts and better agreements faster. We dig into why companies often truly don't understand what's in their agreements that they sign and why that's a problem and how to avoid that trap. We also get into why contract management departments are such an essential function, both from a strategic and a tactical standpoint. And as I mentioned before, why too few growth companies are investing in them. Before we get to Vishal, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing with a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Vishal, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So where have you been sheltering during all this pandemic?
Just north of Boston with my wife and my 2-year-old.
Wife and 2-year-old. So where precisely? What town?
Oh, in Winchester.
Winchester. Okay. I think I've been through there. So question for you is, so what's the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself personally during the pandemic?
I enjoy working from home. It's hard to it's hard to admit that. I've only known life with my work inside of an office primarily, but I think being a founder also, I have worked at home a lot, right, at nights and weekends and such things to drive the business forward, and I actually don't hate it. Now that we've been doing it for like 6 months, kind of finding mechanisms and ways to communicate and stay in touch with folks that need me and when I need information and how do we go get it. But generally, I think it's been a net positive experience. I like kind of being around my wife and my 2-year-old little girl
Sure.
too, and steal a moment here or there and read a book to her or do a puzzle or something. It's fun. It's not so bad.
So is that net positive for you or for the company or both?
The company has done well in a remote environment, though it definitely took some refactoring, especially like in our sales and success teams about how they're going to figure out how to drive the company the way they wanted to. But yeah, I think largely net positive for all.
And so do you contemplate going back, or is Shopify, we're just not going back?
We're already back. We optionally kind of decided that for folks that need better working environments, that if they feel comfortable, our office is available in kind of like a depersonalized rent-to-desk type of experience. And we've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, and it's been met with positivity for those that have gone in and kind of thinking about our employee base at all kind of different ages, and thinking about maybe the younger folks who got into like a smaller apartment or a couple roommates, and maybe they thought they'd only really be home for 6 or 7 hours, and they're thinking about a world where they're now at home for 24 hours, and some of them have felt like it's a breath of fresh air, and others are kind of more comfy and secure at home, and don't want to make it to our office. But we're definitely trying to do everything to accommodate everyone in the kind of the 60-ish employees that we have, and everyone who's in different environments.
So what have you done physically in the offices to set it up to make people feel safe?
Yeah, well, the state of Massachusetts and Boston specifically done a great job kind of providing guidance on kind of what the definition of safe is. So, kind of taking that advice first and foremost, right, with PPE available and hand sanitizing, and we've got a check-in system. We're using some cloud-based kind of tools that you can understand desks that are available, and the other thing we had to do is really take one big sweeping arm across the office and depersonalize it, like kind of remove the notion that this is my desk, right? It's anyone's desk, and kind of set it up differently, and take the guidance on conference rooms and how those are going to work, and set kind of limits there based on the guidance. But yeah, we did all that, and then tried it out, and it's been a overall positive experience. Definitely seeing different efficiencies. So yeah, we like it, and we'll keep going until it makes sense, or stop it if it makes sense to stop it.
And this is a purely random question, but so as a CEO, what do you have to do differently from a liability standpoint?
Yeah, working with our legal team, and kind of figuring out a way to kind of do it safely. And there's a lot of precedent in Boston itself. There are a lot of companies that are open now, kind of in the same environment. So it was easy to find. It was easy to find kind of best practices in terms of like what we do with employees, and how do we message it, how do we keep them safe. So yeah, we worked with our legal team on that, but no heavy lift there.
Okay, well, good luck on that. Because I mean, this is it's a question that a lot of companies are going to be confronting. Probably had plans going back in January, and that may be too optimistic, perhaps, given everything that's going on outside. So tell us a little bit about LinkSquares and what you do.
Yeah, we're changing the way that companies think and work around contracts, and all different types of contracts, be it sales contracts or partnership or marketing or NDAs or whatever it is. And we're charged with the mission of creating an experience where both before a document is signed and after a document is signed, you can gain valuable information and just overall have a better process and more efficiency to ultimately champion a legal person, a person who works on a legal team at a company, to kind of remove the negative connotation that they may be a bottleneck or slow or inefficient, and create the suite of tools that enable them to supercharge and drive their business forward.
Now, at the same time, is this a collaboration-based tool as well, so that if a salesperson is trying to close a deal, that they collaborate on this document with the customer?
We think a collaboration internal today, and we have two products. One is a pre-signature product that's called Finalize, and Finalize is really built around kind of speed of review amongst a company, speed of review, and collaboration internally, to kind of drive the outcome. That ultimately means a document can be signed with greater efficiency, greater visibility, self-service type of actions that enable folks to use things like approved templates when drafting documents, and then managing kind of the process of receiving red lines, receiving third-party paper. So we look at collaboration inside the company first and foremost.
And one of the things you talk about on your website is that the idea is to write better contracts faster. So terms like that always make me want to dig in. So what's a better contract?
Yeah, a better contract is one that maybe started from an approved template, so you use the right version. That's already better than a contract that you accidentally sent out the wrong version that was two revisions ago. A better contract is a contract that had buy-in from your head of information security if you were buying a tool or product, a vendor product that is connecting to your customer data and creating, I don't know, analytics or something like that, right? And you have the buy-in from someone who could vet a contract and give their seal of approval on it. A better contract is also one that you can look back historically easily, kind of find where things deviated and changed. A better contract is one that the people who run the company run these contract creation, negotiations, execution, and then all the way through kind of obligation and understanding what was actually agreed to can have access to that information, right? So it's really a better contract starts with how you create it, but it ends with how you kind of manage it and manage to the obligation and the risk that's inside it.
Now, for the most part, smaller tech companies, startups, and so on, don't have legal departments, but so who are you selling to? Is it just to companies that have legal departments, or is it companies that have contract management departments? I mean, who's the buyer within your clients?
Yeah, a pretty good signal that you're a company that's kind of achieved a level in which you've invested in a senior type of position, like through a general counsel or a chief legal officer. That's a pretty good indication that you could be a good fit. And you've probably reached the kind of operational scale where it made sense to bring someone like that in. But we do often see, smaller companies that have a CFO who's kind of charged with taking this under the wing as well. And so that also creates good opportunities because CFOs generally don't come up through contract negotiation. They came up through accounting or FP&A or something else, right? And so kind of how can we lend ourselves to be useful to both?
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of looking into what you're doing and thinking about it bring back a point that I've talked about fairly frequently, which is I think especially smaller companies scaling quickly and so on. One of the, especially if they sell more complex stuff, so it's not a transactional contract, but it's a contract that those could be back and forth with the buyer and so on, is really miss the bet not having a contract management function in their company. Either they outsource it to a legal firm, or to your point, the CFO becomes the quote unquote expert, or maybe even the CRO or somebody. And I found companies I worked for at senior levels that had this contract management function, got through contracts much more efficiently. I speak from a sales perspective. Take sales largely out of the loop of negotiating contracts, managing contracts, managing. I mean, it's just like, I'm just interested in your experience, because it's like, to me, that's such a strategic position. I see so few companies doing it. I think in part because sales thinks, well, hey, we're all great contract negotiators. And it's like, no, you're not. There's much better people to do it than you. I just wondering what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to why can't a company easily invest in a better way of working, right? Is it a financial constraint? Probably not. I mean, if you have a law firm that's already kind of charged to help you, right?
Charging $800 an hour for something, right?
Yeah, you've already established a relationship where they're in a position to help you. Is it more like there's a perception that if it goes into the legal or contract review dark hole, I'll never see it again, or I won't see it again at the time frame that I need. So expectations are not set, right? And so there's not enough information about like, well, I need this contract now versus everyone saying that versus which ones actually should be prioritized and how, and then kind of managing the ongoing backlog of requests, right? And so why don't companies invest in it is because there's a perception of all these things, right? Like that kind of negatively impact uh, the hesitation, right? And sorry, I mean enables the hesitation, but it's easier to kind of accept all on a document, that has changes in it than ask for guidance. But we all know that's not the right way to work, right? And so, that's a kind of an interesting paradigm, especially in the sales world now. To the extent that you can prove to your CRO with a great relationship with your general counsel, your contracts team, or even the CFO who's using an outside counsel to help them. Don't worry, I got you. Everything will be done. Everything will be done timely. I won't let you down. We'll make all these contracts winners.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah, we'll make all these contracts winners. And how do we build software that can make that possible, right? That's what I get excited about.
Well, and so is that part of the future is what you're looking at is you do pre-signature with finalize, but as you said, it's sort of an internal thing. Is how do you then involve customers in a collaborative effort that facilitates negotiation?
Yeah, so the tool that I think will continue to remain to be the most important tool for that is Microsoft Word. And to the extent that Microsoft Word, I think this is what 1 million man hours of time has gone into building Microsoft Word. No one will ever dethrone that. And to the extent that you can play in and around Microsoft Word, making that kind of transfer of a new version, seamless. I think that's where the greatest efficiency gains come. I think the change of behavior away from Microsoft Word, though it could gain more efficiency, is just too hard. And too many companies have tried and failed. So that's how we look at the world, is that a Microsoft Word file will remain to be opened in Microsoft Word forever.
Yeah, but just think about it. So your second product, you do have Finalize, and you have Analyze, which says powered by AI to help you understand what's in your agreements or this data extraction, full text search. But I'm sort of thinking, well, okay, if you look at the trends within sales, so one of the big things that come up in sort of a revenue operations context is, or enablement context is, how do I provide real time guidance to the seller so that we're in the moment interacting with a prospective buyer, that we can provide guidance, right? There's guided selling, that's sort of the term that's out there. And I was thinking, well, Josh, in a negotiation standpoint, it seems like that would make a lot of sense, right? If you were actually negotiating with a prospect, a buyer for a contract of certain sorts, having that type of tool so that you actually you're collaborating on development of, but you're also using the power of all the data that you've had in the past, all the contracts you've done, to help you do it better.
Yeah, that's ultimately where the company heads, right? If you had 1,000 master service agreements with all your customers, and kind of the patterns and the pattern matching of things you've agreed to, and things that are kind of gone out of vogue, and in terms of legal language, and things that you're consistently agreeing to, like limitation of liability cap, like damages cap, right? I mean, have you done?
Sure.
Have you done 10x before? No, we've never done it.
God,
have you
I
done
hope not.
5x? have you done 5x? Infrequently. What is it more like 1x? Yeah, that's kind of the normal, right? And so you kind of can build out this kind of intelligence playbook where like you're using historical data to help drive your future. And that's what kind of gets me most excited about. We started the company on the AI journey, right, on the post signature, where we're not even dealing with Microsoft Word documents, we're dealing with PDFs.
Right.
And we're dealing with mostly scanned PDFs, which is what was the way, and still is largely the way that documents get signed, right? And so, how do you get insights out of documents that you couldn't search for the last 5 years because it's been a locked document, right? and the value that can be added there, but then kind of the value that comes through insights and benchmarking to essentially drive like smarter decision making. Like I see it all the time. Actually, it's the end of the month. I'm probably negotiating 11 contracts right now simultaneously if I were to
Right.
count.
Right.
I see a red line with termination for convenience come in. I know this one, hard no, we have a rule against it, right? Hard no, termination for convenience. But maybe if I didn't know, could I go and look up how many times I've ever done it? Okay, I've done it 25 times in 1,000 docs, and these are the conditions in which we said yes to it. Well, this is not the condition, so it's really easy. I should say no, right? And that's kind of a crude example of kind of the power of having historical context, right? And kind of what gets us excited about the space.
Yeah, well, I would take it even further and say, okay, well, I'm going to combine it with the data I'm driving from Salesforce and say, or CRM, whatever you're using, but we'll say Salesforce, and say, okay, yeah, in those contracts where I gave termination for convenience clause, let's say, or I allowed a higher coverage on limitation of liability, I did a 5x instead of one time the value of the contract. What happened? How did that correlate to retention rate and renewals and total contract value?
Right.
All that information seems like it'd be hugely valuable to have in the hands not only of the sellers, but also whoever is actually negotiating the contract.
Yeah, and then if you continue to draw the line and expand and zoom out, like what was their NPS like over time? Like, did it make them happier? Did they stick around and be a customer because they found that to be valuable? And how did the whole experience go in interacting with you? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's still largely like a frontier type market. That's how I think about it. Right, we're just beginning now to build reliable, accurate AI systems at scale that can actually, gather the data. What comes next? That's the foundation. What comes next with insights and recommendations and true wisdom is like something that gets me out of bed every day to go solve.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, from a sales perspective, and I'm a big advocate that salespeople should not be negotiating contracts. That and I'll just speak from my own experience. The company as I worked for, startups that became very successful, scaled more quickly by getting sales out of the middle of contracts and having professional contract managers, contractual professional contract negotiators, not lawyers necessarily, except for the most complex ones, perhaps. Yep. But yeah, I worked with professional contract managers who were great negotiators. They weren't lawyers, but hugely experienced. They understood the issues. And yeah, if you're trying to scale a sales organization, get the salespeople out of that business. And the more we can harness the power of the technology to help us do that. I mean, things would be much better. I know sales has such a personal stake, and every salesperson thinks they're a great negotiator, or a large fraction of them do, and they actually don't realize they're actually really quite bad at it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to like, do I trust that legal can get it done? Can you make my timeline and expectations, right? Can you partner with me on it? Can we collaborate internally? Can we make it a win-win so that I get this? Ultimately, we both want the same thing. We both want to sign a document signed that is both, good for the seller and good for the company, right? And so if we always lens what's good for the seller and good for the company together, we're both operating from the same viewpoint. And I think that's when the best, to your point, companies can get made when they're scaling and they're growing quickly, where that handoff and that pass back and forth can be enabled, and software can enable it, right? And to the extent that people invest in them and see the value in a better way to work than accepting all on a Microsoft Word red lines and saying I read it and I'm fine with it. You can probably help your company out for the long term, right? And think about what's best for people's quotas and their selling capability, but also what's best for the company. And that's how we always look at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, multifaceted question. One is, again, if you listen to the show, I'm a big advocate of getting rid of quotas. Other ways to measure that that more successful for sellers, but also then you don't have this conflict necessarily at the end of the month. Is like, yeah, we got the pressure to negotiate, as you talked about. You've got 11 contracts you're trying to negotiate right now in the last 3 days of the business month. And yeah, how does that compromise your decision making?
Yeah, luckily, as a founder of a legal tech company, I have the joy of negotiating against general counsels all the time. So I've seen everything. I've read everything. I've seen every kind of document that there is. I'd never compromise on it ever, even if it takes another hour, even if it takes another revision. I never compromise on it because I know the gain that you get in a particular month, right, to achieve something like artificial, like we're trying to deliver a number in a particular quarter or month. It's not the gain that you want about positioning the company long term, right? And doing what's best to safely, collect build a relationship with another company that we both can operate in solid ground where it's not a risky contract, because these things you'll pay for eventually. Someone will pay for it, right? It may not be the frontline people, but someone will pay for it, right? You'll pay for it with, oh, there's a cure default that I'm issuing you a cure, and you have to cure this part of the app that I think is in violation of the warranty or something like that. And then it's like, well, I didn't understand what cure meant and the cure period, and I didn't understand you're issuing me a cure, and then you can terminate the agreement, and then everyone's screwed, right? And so also, like investors, and if you're a company that's positioned to take on investment or be sold one day, you'll pay for all these sins one day in the future, right? If it's not from, like a termination of a contract, a single point, you'll pay for it in aggregate with bad decision making.
Oh, well, yeah. If you're being acquired and they go through your contracts and say,
that's right.
Oh, yeah, this is a problem. We don't want to assume this liability.
Yeah. So taking that out, right? Taking that friction point out where it's like, I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do. I don't care what's best for the company. To the extent where you can make it easy to do what's best for both folks involved on both sides, with the company and the seller, that's a win.
Yeah, and obviously templated agreements that can be easily modified, so on, is a great way to do it. I'm just fascinated by this idea of being able to correlate it to sales results or revenue numbers and say, okay, yeah, if we've given on this term 4 times in the past in order to get this deal, get similar type deals, and yeah, these deals tend to churn more frequently when we do that. So we're better off not giving in on that deal. Yes, we may not hit the number this month, but in the long term, yeah, we're going to do better by finding customers that we don't need it. Yeah, I do think that is a great use of data within the contract framework to say, okay, yeah, how's this actually affect things? How have they gone on and performed? Because my personal experience, and we think from, it's all anecdotal, but is, yeah, a lot of times some of the buyers that were the most difficult on some really obscure terms were the worst customers, right? They're just difficult to deal with after the fact. Yeah, I have one huge agreement I was negotiating with the customer with my general counsel, but yeah, the customer was just hung up on something in our quality standards guide, right? Quality control standards guides. I mean, we were ISO 9000 certified and 9001 certified, and actually we had a higher. We sold to similar customers, so we were ranked higher by those similar customers as a quality vendor than they were. But yeah, they were gonna fall on their sword on this one, and yeah, it just turned out to be a problematic relationship. You can sort of learn a lot through the negotiation.
Oh yeah, you definitely learn a lot about a company and how they treat you when you're negotiating against them. So
yeah, well, I think too, though, when you have more and more systems like yours being brought into play that are standardized things, then to some degree you begin to reduce, I think, the amount of negotiation that takes place. I mean, it's always been my experience that the more standardized the contract and agreement is, and the more you stand on it, as you said, hey, there's some terms hey, this is the agreement, we don't negotiate on that. That actually helps things go faster.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest support that a legal function, a contracts function, can provide to like a revenue organization is like reflecting on places of a terms of service that are constantly getting negotiated. You're constantly bending on. So like, why don't you just make the thing that you're agreeing to in negotiation the standard and start from there, right? If you're already agreeing to it one off, yeah, there's a half a chance that someone, will take a default versus, default kind of language versus negotiate it. But like to the extent where you can just say, hey, you know what? We've been comfortable with this 50 times. Why don't we just make this the standard? And then we can all save the headache of seeing it as another red line for the next 500 deals that we do, right? And I think the greatest kind of way, and it's really hard to do because you're basically asking for like non-standard language to drive a decision to make it your standard language is like really hard to do. That's kind of one of the things that you can do in our AI product is kind of understand like the non-standard parts of it. And then drive a better
in your analyzed product.
In our analyzed product, yeah, and kind of drive that kind of outcome where you can have a reflective moment, like 6 months into the year, like, okay, how many times has this term been negotiated? Oh, it's been negotiated a lot, and here's all the ways that we've negotiated it. Let's just make this the standard, and then we can save ourselves a headache the next time that someone strikes it. So I think that's like really fascinating. About how
if you can use your data from your CRM system and find out that actually we really didn't want to give on that because every time we gave on it, it caused some other problem that had some impact on revenue.
There you
then
go.
You have that too. It's, hey, maybe we're not finding the right fit for our system because maybe we're calling it too small a companies or too big a companies or something that, this always becomes an issue.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like a fascinating second order type of analysis is like, we know that like price and discounting impacts, value and usage and kind of perception, right? How does that relate to like a terms of service when someone is making outlandish demands and you're agreeing to it? Is it having a negative impact or is it having a positive impact? I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes it's a negative impact. You may get the deal, but it may be a deal you regret getting.
That's right.
So yeah, it's salespeople don't think about that perspective often enough. It's like, and that's sort of a phrase I love to use is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And it applies to certain deals you close. Just because you can close them doesn't mean you should. And oftentimes contract negotiations, unfortunately, coming later in the day, are one of the ways you learn that. And so I would think and hope that one of the ways your customers are using the system is, get the agreements out there much earlier in the process, the sales process.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a tried and true thing. It's like if you believe that the conversation around a terms of service can happen earlier and earlier in the sales process, and you're confident in sending the most approved kind of terms of service earlier to start having that conversation, it's only going to net the outcome that you want in a faster timeline than if you waited to the last moment. And that's kind of core to my CRO, Steve, and his strategy. He's got to negotiate against the ultimate negotiators that are our buyers, right? The general counsels. And so it's like, if there's an indication that it could get serious into a buying process, it's like, who's going to review the terms? Will you review it? Can we pass it off to someone on your team? Like, can we get this out ahead of waiting to the last moment? Because I know at the ends of months and quarters, they themselves are working on their company's contracts for their customers to make their engine go, right? And so how can we work on this efficiently, where you can buy software and buy ours? So yeah, it's believe it or not, sales folks, the legal team is here to help if it's done correctly.
Yeah. Well, I think, but I didn't mean to laugh at it because if you're a salesperson, you have a legal team, in-house legal team, or you have in-house contracts team. If you're not trying to make them your best friend, instead of resisting it, if you're not trying to make them your best friend, to take advantage, to leverage their expertise in order to help you negotiate better contracts faster, so that you can spend your time doing what you're best at, which is not negotiating, which is hopefully selling. Yeah, if you're not taking that step, if you're in sales, you've got a legal department, you got a contracts team. If you're not leveraging it, yeah, you're not helping yourself at all. So last thing I wanted to sort of talk about, because I'd come across some of your blog posts on your site, and I hadn't been paying attention to this. I should have been. Is this European Court of Justice ruling, the Schrems II ruling? Pretty significant for people doing business in Europe. It says that it struck down the privacy shield standard that allowed businesses to move data between the United States and the EU without running, cross purposes with EU privacy law. It seems like a lot of companies probably have to be rewriting contracts.
Yeah, rewriting contracts, and I think it's kind of seen a trend, like when the GDPR regulation came out, that was kind of like the first triggering point. And then, California, if you think about them like their own country, they came up with their own privacy policy, and
we are our own country out here. Just make sure people understand that. 5th largest economy in the world, just FYI. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah, I mean, it's a trend, right? It's a trend, and I think there are other states that are trying to follow suit. I think with California as well. We're seeing Brazil take a pretty hard stance on it too. That's kind of like the latest thing that's been on the radar. It's like kind of following suit around privacy. And yeah, it's like, what are the foundations of contracts? How were they negotiated historically? Did you agree that privacy shield would be maintained between the company A would maintain their privacy shield, and if they didn't, there was a right to terminate company B. I mean, that's like a major thing, right? And
yeah,
and and again, like coming back to like, how are you going to solve this problem if you have 10,000 customer agreements, right? And surely reading all of them or paying your outside counsel $800 an hour just can't be the best way to do it, right? And
so with your system, could you, on sort of a blanket basis, go across and create updated agreements with this specific clause inserted in it?
Well, taking a step back, like, all right, so you got 10,000 customer agreements. They may or may not have the language. Okay, so you set them up inside Analyze, our post-signature product. What do you get access to immediately? You can run your own search queries, right? You can type in Privacy Shield and see how many contracts have it mentioned, right? And immediately start focusing efforts on all of these have to be amended immediately, right? The creation of an amendment, that's like a smart legal person can do that in maybe like 5 minutes, right? To amend the contract, to take that out, right? Or nullify that kind of whatever contractual language.
But you don't want to do it 10,000 times, though.
Yeah, you may not want to. You may want to do it 10,000 times. We're really focusing on in your existing contracts. Can you identify the ones that are at risk first and foremost? Because you got to put a Band-Aid on this as fast as you can, right? And then the other way to do it is to get access to an algorithm that can extract like a whole paragraph, data protection paragraph, right? Or data privacy paragraph that lives even unique to your contracts and the way you wrote it, right? And that algorithmic extraction technology can serve you into like writing a better paragraph too, and kind of guiding the decision making. That's kind of like the world that we play in, right? We are then not like robotically reaching out and saying it's time for you to sign a document. There's plenty of systems that can do that, right? We're really focused on, can I get you access to the needles in the haystack you need to go find and do it quickly.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, Vishal, thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And if people wanted to find out more about LinkSquares, how can they do that?
Oh, come visit us at our website, linksquares.com. Check us out on LinkedIn. We're pretty entertaining. And we love to hear from you.
All right. Well, good. Well, Vishal, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank Vishal Sunak for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or a review and let us know how we're doing, well, we'd certainly appreciate that. Do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Ever wish you could coach like you've listened to every sales call without actually having to listen to every sales call? Conversation AI from RingDNA uses the power of artificial intelligence to help busy sales managers know exactly where to focus their coaching efforts. Learn which talking points are working and which are falling flat, ramp new reps faster, and help your entire team master the art of conversation. Unlock your team's full potential with the power of AI. Learn more at ringdna.com/CAI. That's ringdna.com/CAI.